living la vida low carb. This show is changing lives. We talking about your diet, trying to get you feeling right. Cut up them avocados, fry some eggs, time to explore the longest running health podcast, hosted by Jimmy Moore. Time to give up the crappy garbage. We're getting into ketosis. Every day is a new step to your goal. Yeah, you're getting closer, motivated and focused. Don't stop, just go. Time to get inspiration from the Living La Vida Low Carb Show. Hey, the livinglowcarbshow.com.
That's Dr. Jen Unwin. Go check her out, you guys. She is a clinical psychologist and is a specialist in trying to figure out why in the world do we crave sugar, processed carbs, especially when we have some of the little mind games that we play with ourselves going on. So Jen, welcome.
Thanks, Jimmy. It's a pleasure to be here. Lovely to speak to you.
Yes, and so why don't you tell us a little bit of kind of the basics of how you got interested in this subject so we know why you are talking about this today and why it's so important.
It's always a personal story, isn't it? It's like we get passionate about stuff that affects us and then we see it maybe affecting other people. So really it started about 8 or 9 years ago. I found low carb, like lots of people. Myself and my husband, who's a GP in the UK, Dr. David Unwin, started helping people in his practice to reverse their diabetes and other conditions using low carb ketogenic advice and basically kind of cutting out sugar. And loads of people have done really well, and if you go ahead and Google Unwin and low carb, you'll see the papers that he's written, we've written together, and maybe some of the conference presentations we've done. You'll see the amazing results people were getting there. Personally, and some of the people in the practice, we started noticing that, maybe that's not the whole story. Some of us still continue to struggle a bit, and we still, from time to time, kind of fell off the wagon in inverted quotes, and that got us to thinking, well, what's that about? And certainly for myself, it's something I've struggled with all my life, is really this kind of craving and desire and love, absolute love affair with sweet and carby and sugary foods. So for the last couple of years, I've really been looking into that, learning about it from some of the world's experts like Bitten Johnson, who you'll see some of her work on the Diet Doctor website, which a lot of you will be familiar with. So I've done training with her and just been looking into the literature and trying to understand it and seeing what worked for myself. Then over lockdown, I've given birth to a book called Fork in the Road, which sort of summarizes everything that I've learned over the last 2 years and incorporates the words of people like Bitten and some other people who work a lot with food addiction and sugar addiction. So it shares their expertise as well. And Jimmy, you'll have come across Georgia Eade.
Of course.
Yeah, who's a psychiatrist who helps people with ketogenic diets. So she's contributed as well.
Yes.
It's been an absolute pleasure to work with them and to kind of understand this more. There's more to learn. There's more research to be done. We need to keep campaigning because this isn't a condition that's recognised.
Yes.
It's not in the DSM.
Yes.
It's not in the ICD, which is the World Health Organization. We're getting a campaign together to try and make that happen. So if people are interested, keep an eye on my website, which is Fork in the Road, or the charity that I support and all the money from the book is going to, which is the Public Health Collaboration, phcuk.org website.
Sam Feltham.
And you'll see updates there about that campaign. So that's just the background of it. So I'm really excited to hear people's questions.
Yes. So Jen, that's Sam Feltham's group, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sam's a longtime friend and Georgia's a longtime friend. I know everybody in this space, sadly, so you're all friends. And I've only just recently came across you. I knew David for many years, but I never put two and two together with who you were. So I'm glad we got you on here today. But I have a theory, Jen. You've been deep in the throes of this topic, how to break addiction to crappy garbage. You've been deep in the throes of this for many years. Here is my theory about why we have such an addiction to carbs. Correct me if I'm wrong, or if you go, oh, I didn't thought of that before. I think when they made us all scared of fat, it defaulted us to carbohydrate because you can only eat just so much protein. Protein pretty much in all the diet studies pretty much stays stagnant, if not lower, but never hardly ever goes higher. So when they made us eat less fat because they scared the living bejeebies out of us that it's going to cause heart disease and all the rest, it forced us to eat carbs. and then we got addicted to the carbs, but then they still, even in the midst of that, even as it became super obvious that that was what was happening, vilify fat. Even to this day, even the latest USDA dietary guidelines that just came out last year, and I'm sure they're similar in the UK where you are, they still vilify fat. That's why we stay addicted. People are frightened half to death of real whole food based fats.
I think that's certainly part of it. And those of us that grew up in the 70s, we all had that, didn't we? We had that kind of fear of fat. And then, of course, it's gone on to kind of fear of meat and saturated fat. Yeah, so I agree that, that's part of the story. I think some of us have a much stronger tendency to this, and it starts pretty young. I mean, I don't know about you or anyone else who's listening, but I look back, my earliest memories were of wanting carby foods and being kind of interested in them, and then more or less doing anything to get them, sneaking, hiding. I would spend all my pocket money on sweets if I had any. I thought they were the best things in the world. And I think some of us kind of start out that way. I agree that's not the case for everybody. I think those of us that are kind of hardcore have an act. The difference, isn't there, between kind of liking this stuff and not genuinely being able to moderate it, and those of us that have a real problem with it. And I think those of us that have a real problem with it do kind of, we do gravitate towards keto and low carb because we kind of know, really.
We have to.
We have to, yeah. We know we can't control that stuff, and actually, that is the solution. Of course, for an addiction, what's the solution? It's abstinence. We don't tell alcoholics just to have a little bit of whiskey.
Take cocaine in moderation.
It's not, moderation is not okay if you can't moderate. That's the point.
Right.
I think food addiction is actually the toughest nut to crack. Number one, we've all been hooked on it since we were young.
Yep.
We were kind of given it as love, as reward, like my story. I loved that stuff. It was a big part of my life. So we've had it since we were young. It changes our brains, from young. We don't give kids alcohol. We don't give them cigarettes. And we don't give them caffeine. Some people do. If you're addicted to cigarettes, you can give them up. You never have to pick one up again. You never have to drink alcohol again, but we all have to eat.
Yes.
So we're walking a tightrope of what do we eat. Now, the point is, we don't tell alcoholics when they've given up drinking what to drink, do we? We just say, don't drink alcohol, drink whatever else the heck you like. So for food addicts, don't have sugar, carbohydrate, and anything else you can't moderate. And for some of us, definitely sweeteners.
Yes.
I'm not a fan of sweeteners at all, and big time for food addicts. You might need them to get off sugar, but after that, try and get off them, a bit like methadone. You're transitioning, get off, but then get off the sweeteners. Some food addicts have real problems with dairy as well. I don't know what you think, Jimmy, but I think dairy, things like cheese, and also nut butters. I mean, I was crazy for peanut butter. If it was in the house, I was in the jar, so to speak. So I don't buy that stuff anymore. I just don't keep it in the house. Out of sight is out of mind. Another thing which we might chat about later on, depending on the questions, is alcohol. I genuinely think if you've got a serious problem with food addiction, you probably need to quit alcohol as well. Because
yes.
It's all the same pathways.
That's right.
Same dopamine pathways.
Yes.
You're firing them up, and if you have alcohol, it blocks gluconeogenesis, so you feel hungrier anyway. It also disinhibiting, so you're more likely to kind of think, what the heck, and have whatever the thing is. The guidelines for people who really struggle with this are, keto, low carb, a kind of really clean version. So not with the keto baking, leave out the sweeteners, maybe be careful with dairy, be careful with nuts, and probably leave out alcohol. It sounds like a lot if you're listening and you're at the beginning of your journey, but what I would say to people is that if they can slowly move towards that,
it's the goal.
So you feel so free, you're liberated from the cravings, from this inability to sort of cut down,
yes.
From feeling preoccupied. You kind of get the freedom from that.
Well,
so keep going until you get there is my advice.
I love your British mannerisms because my Southern gentlemanness is going to let you keep talking, and so.
Well, I could keep going, but it'd be interesting to have a bit of interaction.
Jimmy had 12 questions in the midst of you talking that I was like, I can't get a word in edgewise. It's all good. I do have one comment, though, about the topic, that dopamine response. That was one of the things you brought up. Because when people get that desire for dopamine hit, it comes in the form of carb craving, sugar cravings. And I argue to people, just because it's a carb craving, sugar craving in your head, doesn't mean that that's what your body's screaming for. Your body's screaming for the dopamine hit. So there are other things that you can do to get that same dopamine hit. Exercise does it. I think think being in the presence of someone you love does it. There's so many things that will give you that dopamine hit. Why do we turn? Is it just because our brains readily remember when we had donut, it gave us that excitement factor?
100%. Yeah, you absolutely nails it there, Jimmy. So food is going to give us a dopamine hit. It's a survival mechanism. We were born with that, right? We wouldn't have been here if we didn't enjoy eating. So what you get with high carb food is a much bigger hit, if you like, and kind of unusually big hit. So two things happen. One is that actually you're then driven to, it's the neurotransmitter of habit and motivation. You're then driven to repeat that behavior, and you're really sensitive to the cues that were around at the time when you got the hit. That's where the big food brands really have us. They have this kind of branding, they have particular slogans, they're advertising. Also, we're familiar with the smell and the sight of whatever it is our kind of drug food. So you will be cued by thinking about or seeing those things.
Yes.
Repeat that behavior. So that happens. And then on the other hand, the brain actually, like every system in the body, wants to keep a bit of balance. So it doesn't really like that massive dopamine hit. It thinks, whoa, going on there. It doesn't think anything, does it? But it reacts. What's going on there? And it downgrades your dopamine receptors. So next time you go ahead and reach for whatever it is, you need
more of it.
Effective tolerance, yeah, exactly like alcohol. Over time, you're going to need more and more, and people probably recognise that. I mean, I was like that. One slice of cake wasn't enough. It was never enough. It just
right.
You have to have more to get the same hit. And also, people are going to be cotton on that actually down-regulating your dopamine receptors is a really bad idea. So every time you have something sweet, you're digging yourself into a more depressed position, because we need dopamine for motivation. And a similar thing happens with serotonin, which is another major neurotransmitter in the brain. Serotonin is our kind of the happy, relaxed hormone. And again, if you're hitting that hard with sugar, it's a bit complicated, but it's to do with tryptophan. So if you eat something sweet, you get insulin, and insulin helps you store fat and get sugar out of the bloodstream. But also it allows tryptophan to get through the blood-brain barrier, which is kind of a good thing, but it lets more in than normal. And tryptophan turns into serotonin, which is this happy hormone. But yet again, the brain kind of goes, we're not sure about that much serotonin. So it's not quite exactly the same mechanism as dopamine, but it's basically the same result. So more sugar, over time, less serotonin. And serotonin, folks, is the stuff they put in antidepressants.
Yes.
It's a horrible trap. The sugar trap is a horrible trap. You feel you need it, you have it, but actually you're making yourself more miserable over time. I really hope that kind of information helps people in the moment. Like you say, the moment you kind of want to reach for that stuff, you're digging yourself into a hole there, not out. And you're absolutely right. Loads of exercise is brilliant for both serotonin and dopamine. Any hobbies, I'm a knitter. That's how I get my dopamine. Exercise, sunshine, being with other people.
We put this in my book, Keto Clarity. When you feel that craving for sugar or carbohydrates, instead try having a bit of fat and protein instead. So in our book, if you can tolerate dairy, I know not everyone can, you like a little block of cheddar cheese and put some grass-fed butter on it and then stick it in your pie hole. And usually your body goes, okay, we're getting some nutrients now. Maybe it's not the nutrients we sent your brain that we wanted. It's not that Twinkie, ding dong, ho ho, Coca-Cola, you pick your poison, but it's something that's nutrients. And then when those nutrients get in your body, everything seems to calm down. What happened there?
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Yeah, as I often say to people, have a hard-boiled egg. And if you're not hungry for a hard-boiled egg or a piece of chicken or, like you said, a piece of cheese, you're not hungry really. It's something else going on. You're quite right. So when you eat protein and fat, that sends certain signals to the brain to do with leptin and ghrelin, isn't it? I'm not an expert on this, but you have an off button for that stuff. So anyone who sits down to eat chicken breast or steak will know, you might be able to eat quite a bit. I could eat quite a bit, but you stop eventually. You have a hard stop, don't you? That feeling where you just go, I cannot eat another bite of that. Whereas carbohydrates, for survival reasons, don't have an off mechanism. They don't have a sort of feedback mechanism to the brain, other than, as I say, you tend to want more and more of them. I think that's what's going on there, is that the fat and the protein will send the proper real food, real nutrition, fullness signals to the brain, whereas carbohydrate, after a big meal, you can always go for dessert. There's always room for a little bit more.
Having a hard time reaching my goal weight.
Just use Keto Chow, the magical meal replacement that makes keto easy. Prep takes seconds. Just add the fat you want, Keto Chow, water, and shake. And before you know it, you'll be getting rid of the fat you don't want.
I did it.
I can't believe you're finally here!
Jimmy loves
and I'm wearing
KetoChow.com.
You know, you just explained why I was up to, right before I changed to a low carb diet, I was up to drinking 16 cans of Coca-Cola a day. I was eating whole boxes of snack cakes, Little Debbie snack cakes. I was going to fast food, junk food. Like, you're right. Like, I never thought about it being this progressively more and more and more because you needed that more to get the same hit.
Yeah, exactly like alcohol, exactly the same process.
Wow. When I found out the same part of your brain that gets excited about drugs and alcohol gets excited by sugar, that was when it all became clear. Why isn't this more well known? Like, if this is so known, why are doctors still pushing, well, you should cut your fat and cut your calories, when that's the antithesis of what they should be doing?
I don't like to kind of be a conspiracy theorist. The more you're in this field, the more you kind
Yes.
of... Obviously, the food industry doesn't want this information as general information, and they fund a lot of research. That's another podcast, isn't it?
Another topic for another day, as we
That's
say.
another day, yeah, absolutely.
Dr. Jen Unwin here today has a book called Fork in the Road, forkintheroad.com.uk, or is it just .com?
The website's forkintheroad.co.uk, and the book is Fork in the Road, out now on Amazon. And today, I just checked, we're number 2 on Kindle in nutrition.
Wow, that's a big deal. I don't think I've hit a book in number 2 in nutrition. Wow, good job. Really excited about this topic because everybody seems to be addicted to the carbs, and no matter how much they try, they can't even imagine. Like right now, I'm currently in the midst of a very long fast. I just started day number 10 of just no food, no nothing. And if you ever want to test like real hunger, kind of what do I really crave? What do I really want? Go on a long fast. Obviously, after you're well keto adapted and you're kind of soaring, push the boundary of your body to see how well you do. You'll be surprised how little of those signals that our brains get that we're wanting carbs or any food that's junk at all goes away. Have you done any of looking at fasting as a method of breaking people of this addiction?
You have to be really quite cautious, actually, quite cautious with fasting with people with food and sugar addiction. They're definitely right. They need to, step 1 is abstinence and getting in a real steady rhythm with that.
Yes.
If they get over hungry, you know,
yes.
Really get your clean keto, low carb nailed down, get in a steady thing where you've got no cravings. And then obviously people, exactly as you say, people are then aware, they tend to be less hungry, they're less cravey. So lots of people tend to then naturally drift into 2 meals a day. Or,
yes.
On the whole, I do 1 meal a day. I do some additional, like I'm just on day 2 now, I'm probably going to go to day 5. But on the whole, certainly not for newbies.
No.
With maybe later on, and then with caution. You know, eating windows.
Yes.
That's all good if people can do it comfortably, which they usually can once they've got in the swing.
Yeah, when you get those addictions under control, it's almost a default. You just kind of accidentally do. I remember when I went keto, like full-on keto and testing blood ketones circa 2012, I forgot to eat. I think for the first time in my life for a whole day, I was like, what? Wait a minute, what? I forgot to eat. I forgot to eat. Yeah. Like, this is the guy that drank 16 cans of Coca-Cola and never went more than like 10, 15 minutes without putting something in my mouth.
Yeah, I didn't know it was humanly possible not to eat for more than 2 hours until I went low carb, yeah.
Yes. Ada is a health coach and helps clients all the time. What you got for us, sweetie?
Yeah, I just wanted to share what I do with my clients to help them with their addiction. And in the Latin community, that's pretty common. 8 times out of 10, that's what I hear. I'm addicted to sugar. I can't quit sweets. I cannot quit sweets. It's like the number 1 thing that I hear all the time. The way that I do it is I cut 1 sugary source a week, knowing that glucose is not just sweets, of course, it's all carbohydrates turned into glucose. So, but the first thing that I eliminate in my program is sugary beverages. That is the first thing that goes. Half of the people go like, oh, that's going to be easy for me. Yes, until we start. Because then they don't realize that orange juice that's organic and came down from heaven is still sugar, right?
Yes.
And then they're like, okay, this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be. So, and then of course the sugar in the coffee, they cannot see themselves having black coffee. At the end of the program, everybody's drinking black coffee and they go like, what? How did this happen? But yeah, little things like that. So I eliminate all sugary beverages. that entire week, the first week. That's the first thing we do. I highly encourage no sweeteners, because again, just like Dr. Unwin said, I'm not just trying to decrease that dependence of blood glucose, but also that dependence of that hits the dopamine, the reward center of the brain, right? So tackling from both angles. And then the second week, what I do is I eliminate all processed foods. So if it comes in a bag, in a box, in a can, and it has more than 3 ingredients, it's enough. Unless, of course, tuna is a processed food. It comes in a can, but that's real food, right? So common sense here. Then week 3 is when things get really interesting for us Spanish people, because we're all about the bread and the rice and the potatoes and the yuca and all of those root vegetables, right? So that's the 13 that goes out from the plan. And then the 4th week, I eliminate fruits. And so by week 5, we have pretty much eliminated all sources of glucose in the system. And I find that has worked really, really well for my audience and my target clients.
Nice. Jen, you like all that?
I'm loving that. Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. I like that how you kind of do it in a stepwise way and people understand the way that you're going, but you're not kind of leaping straight in. I personally did go cold turkey right at the beginning, but it's pretty harsh, isn't it? And it's nice to do it in that kind of stepwise way, particularly if people are having a lot of wheat drinks and beverages, because it's an absolute load of sugar, when you start to work it out. That's brilliant. I love that.
Well, and the tough ones are where they're supposedly healthy, things like the fruit juices, like orange juice. Oh, well, it's orange juice. It's got to be healthy, right, Ada? And so they try to compromise with you. Well, surely that's healthy.
Absolutely. But you can't. The numbers don't lie. Check your blood glucose.
Yes. This is why I think testing blood sugar, Jen, should be like always the parameter of any food you consume.
Yeah, people learn such a lot. I mean, David's often giving people the Freestyle Libre for a couple of weeks.
Yes.
Just to look at, and they're amazed. There's a fabulous fact that you'll know, Jimmy, isn't it? Which is how much sugar is actually in a healthy bloodstream at any one time.
Yes.
It's just about a teaspoon.
1 teaspoon, guys. One teaspoon.
So, and if you want to see how much sugar is in everyday foods, if you look on the Public Health Collaboration website or you Google Unwin sugar infographics, David's done a load of these, and you'll see that a banana has 6 teaspoons. So when somebody tells you that a banana is a good snack, you can say, well, you could have a sixth of a banana will be all the sugar you need. And as we all know anyway, your body makes, I never eat any sugar, and so my body just makes the papilloma livers chugging along, making the sugar that my brain needs, or the small amount it needs. So I think things like facts like that, bits of information, I think can really stick with people and really make the point that the amount of sugar and carbohydrate in the modern diet, that's not normal. Someone was saying to me the other day, she's trying to do low carb, and she said everyone else is saying to her that what she's doing isn't normal. So I kind of talked about all that. We said, actually, what everybody's doing isn't normal. Yes.
Yeah, we're the normal ones. They're the abnormal ones having all that load.
We're eating the proper human diet.
Yes. So Jen mentioned a Freestyle Libre. So those of you in the audience that don't know what that is, go look it up. It is called a CGM, continuous glucose monitor. You pop it on the back of your arm. Some people put it on their stomach or their leg. But basically what it does is it gives you an on-demand your blood sugar. Any given moment, you can have a little iPhone app. You can just wave it over it. And then I've done many of them, Jen, over the years, doing all kinds of tests. Used to back in the day before CGMs were in America, I was pricking my finger and I was running out of fingers to prick anymore because it was bad. But thank you, Ada. Ada, you had one more thing?
I just wanted to give kudos to Dr. Jen and her husband for the infographics. I use them all the time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So Cognitus says, what are your thoughts about raw honey? Well, I'll say real quick before Jen gives her answer. It's still sugar. Like, it's just another form of sugar. And again, it's one of those things like the orange juice, Jen. They hear honey. Well, it's from a bee. It's natural. It's a real food, which is all those things are true. But you still can't run away from the metabolic consequences of that sugar.
Your liver doesn't know if it was orange juice, sugar, or sugar out of the bowl on the table. It's just, the body just treats it glucose and fructose. It's usually a mixture of the two, isn't it? Like table sugar is a mixture of the two, but yeah, it just has the same effect.
Next up we have Dax. He's into kind of the mindset and kind of changing your thinking about things. What's up, Dax?
Hey, good morning, Jimmy.
Hey, bud.
Dr. Jen, great to be here.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah, I'm just out here at the track doing sprints and running stairs, getting my dopamine hit for the day, and just was going to just give some anecdotal experience about getting rid of sugar.
Yeah.
I cut out all sugar completely. I cut my carbs down to 20% of my normal intake, and then I also doubled up when I started that week for the fast. I doubled up on my GTF chromium, and I added some gymnema sylvestre, which is a natural carb reduction. Your desire for carbs goes down with that. And then I did the 7-day water fast, and coming out of that, I did the reverse order of everything. I kept the chromium going and just reintroducing about 20% of my normal carbs, which is not very much, but it absolutely makes a difference. Just eliminating sugar, just that one thing, sugar. If you can get rid of, even if you're eating other carbs, just getting rid of sugar will change your mood. It will change your outlook on life. It will improve your interpersonal relationships. Sugar is not your friend. And I love sugar. I used to have a 6-pack of Pepsi, a couple candy bars, maybe some ice cream at night, every day. I know the addiction. I know how it feels, and I know how it feels coming off of it. Yeah, Dr. Jen, you're doing a great job. Appreciate the great input. Jimmy, you have great guests on here.
Thank you, sir. Jen?
Yeah, it's not easy, is it? But it's worth it. I think that's what you're saying, Dax, is it can be done if you can just push through. People are amazed. I mean, we've had patients so amazed at literally the clarity, talking about keto clarity, the clarity of the mind, how much better the mood is, how much more stable the mood is, how much more energy throughout the day. Sugar is bad for your physical health, but it's bad for your mental health as well.
Well, the problem is they sneak it into even so-called keto foods. I remember somebody wrote me the other day that they said, I got a spike in my blood sugar having a rotisserie chicken. And I'm like, how in the world? And I said, go get do you still have the ingredients list? Yes. You should just say chicken and maybe some other things. And they had infused it with sugar. And I'm going, what in the hell?
I know. You have to read every single label. I mean, I try not to buy things with labels on now. I think that's just easier. But yeah, label coleslaw. You'd have that in the States, don't you?
Yes.
It's supposed to be cabbage, carrot and a bit of mayo. And it's just, if you buy it from the store, it's just full of rubbish. It's got sugar in it.
Yes, chicken salad, same way.
Make your own mayo. It's not difficult. You can do it in like 30 seconds.
Yes.
We just eat. I mean, it's basically more or less kind of meat and veg in various combos really now.
Yes. So next up we have a medical doctor. What's up, Dr. Nick?
Hi, Jen. I know we corresponded on Twitter and elsewhere. I'm a cold turkey person. I think first step is to recognize that it is an addiction. I know there's controversy over whether or not, you can really be addicted to, sugar based on brain scan studies. The answer is 110% yes. In fact, there's some really interesting research. It was done, I think, 2008 over at Harvard, where they looked at people's desire centers, the nucleus accumbens, in the center of the brain, just manipulating the sugariness of the food. So even keeping the carbohydrate content the same, the proteins and the fats, but making the glycemic index higher, people couldn't tell the difference, but their wanting centers just lit up like they had cocaine or sex or something. I think the first step is recognize it isn't addiction, and then how would you deal with any other addiction, alcoholism, smoking? Just commit to maybe a period of it being a little bit tough, but know that the grass is going to be greener on the other side, because it's not going to be easy like Dax said, but like Jen said, it's 110% worth it for your health and for your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, I was a cold turkey person as well. So, sometimes people do that. Just a few little cautions. If you're on medication for anything really, blood pressure or diabetes, particularly, there's a group of medications called the SGLT2 inhibitors. You shouldn't just go cold turkey, low carb. There are some risks there. And if you're on blood pressure medication, tell your doctor before you get started, because you're probably going to have to reduce it, because the effects of giving up sugar are so marked that your blood pressure can kind of lower. And as I say, if you're on these SGLT2 inhibitors, that can cause actually a serious problem. So you need to be careful there before making any drastic changes in your diet. There's a really good paper on de-prescribing medication for people going low carb. I don't know if you've seen it, Jimmy, but it's David's one of the authors, and a guy in the UK called Dr. Campbell Murdoch. And I think it's in the BMJ. So if you Google Murdoch Unwin de-prescribing,
it'll come up.
Diabetes, low carb, you'd probably see the paper. But yeah, it's just a little warning for people. I wouldn't want anyone in the audience to start tomorrow if they're on certain kinds of medications and then come back and.
So that's a really interesting thing that Nick brings up, because I think the taste of sweet has a far more addictive property than what he was saying, the same kind of carbohydrate content, but not sweet. This is why I think people like Dr. Robert Lustig were like, sugar is the issue, and maybe white potatoes and white rice may not be as bad because the addictive properties, you're not getting that immediate feedback on the taste receptors of telling your brain you're eating something sweet when you're having something starchy. Now, that's not to say some people can still not have a problem with the starches. You will, some people, but not everyone. This is why I think paleo was so popular, because they tended to take away all those sweet parts and left some of the real food carbohydrates. It's a fascinating conversation. Dr. Nick?
I like to differentiate between true hunger for your nourishment, and then hormonal hunger. So what happens when you have sugar or high glycemic carbs is your blood sugar spikes and your insulin spikes with it. And then what happens is they both drop, and they even drop below baseline, and then your brain freaks out. And it gets this craving that you perceive as hunger, but it's really just a craving. Your body's not looking for nourishment. Your brain just going into a little bit of panic mode. And that usually happened over evolution because we didn't have exposure to high glycemic carbs. We just did. Maybe every now and then you get into a beehive and get some honey, but pretty rare.
Yeah.
So what happens is then you ride this, quote, insulin roller coaster. So insulin spikes and drops, and you're driven to eat every 3 to 4 hours. That's why people get hungry every 3 to 4 hours. But if you eliminate the insulin roller coaster by getting rid of sugar, or even getting rid of carbs to be more potent, then what happens is your body realizes if there is excess fat and if you have weight to lose, oh look, I have this giant tank of fuel that I'm not tapping into. Let me tap into that because, well, I have it. So you become, and this is now mixing analogies, but I just envision the body as this gasoline carrying truck, like a Shell truck. It's carrying gas from point A to point B, and it's running on this tiny little tank of liver glycogen. It makes no sense. Like, why would you just stick to 120 grams of carbs in your liver when you have this enormous tank of fuel that you could just run on basically forever? So when you eliminate the insulin roller coaster, and sorry for mixing analogy, you learn to tap into that fuel on the back, and you're just liberated from having to eat every 3 to 4 hours, which is kind of a bother in addition to being profoundly unhealthy.
And unpractical.
You guys tried the Paleo Valley beef sticks? These beef sticks are 100% grass-fed and grass-finished. And many of the grass-fed beef sticks on the market today are actually finished with grains. They use beef sourced from small domestic farms in the United States. They only use real organic spices to flavor the beef sticks versus all the conventional spices sprayed with pesticides and other natural flavors from GMO. They also ferment the sticks, which creates naturally occurring probiotics, all great for your gut health. And best of all, they taste amazing. Again, they're Paleo Valley, my favorite beef stick on the market today. Go check them out, you guys.
PaleoValley.com.
Use the coupon code Jimmy at checkout for 15% off your first order. Paleo Valley beef sticks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well summarized. Yeah, absolutely. It's much better to be a fat burner. It's much steadier form of energy. Brain loves ketones. We know you're much less likely to get all of these kind of long-term conditions like diabetes, or it's implicated in Alzheimer's now, isn't it? A high sugar diet. So that's the good thing, really, that for those of us that are sugar and carb addicts, we end up actually on a really healthy diet. We can stick to it, so that's all good.
Yes. Dr. Nick, thank you so much. Next up, we have a filmmaker of a movie called Fat Fiction, talking about low-carb diets and the importance of not fearing fat anymore. So, Jennifer, welcome. Speak to Dr. Jen Unwin.
Hi, Dr. Unwin. It's so wonderful to hear your voice and hear all your valuable information. You and your husband's work was an inspiration to me while I was making Fat Fiction. I have 2 teenage daughters, a 14-year-old and a 19-year-old. They crave these ultra-processed foods. It's a constant battle in our household to talk them out of wanting to go and purchase these foods. I myself don't purchase them. We eat a whole foods, low carbohydrate, nutrition sort of plan at home. But any tips for helping kids avoid these foods, counsel them in the right direction?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important, isn't it? Once the scales have fallen from our eyes, of course, we want everybody that we love, all our friends and family, to sort of, be doing the same thing as well. Yeah, so we had teenagers as well when we started. So you're absolutely right not to buy. I think the first thing is not to enable. So talk to people who say, well, I'm sticking to the low carb thing, but they're still buying things for the kids. And you're like, well, you know, you don't need to do that, particularly if they're 14 and 19. Presumably, you know, they have some means of their own, and if they absolutely want it, as you say, that, you know, they'll go and get it, and you can't really, don't think you can really stop them doing that. I think you can only live by example, which is what we did. We provided low carb keto at home. Sometimes it's about the best hopes. I mean, you know, obviously I'd have to kind of know each of them better, but our teenager, I used to let him microwave his own rice and stuff to add to his meal if he wanted to, or, you know, I would do that for him. I didn't mind doing that. But in the end, he actually chose to come along for the ride because he'd started putting on a bit of weight. And obviously, you know, when they're young, they want to look good, don't they? And they want to kind of be healthy and be attractive and so on. So in the end, he chose that. I also had another one who was obsessed with Cocoa Pops, which is a kind of cereal that we have in the UK. And he said one day he wanted to live on it. And I said, well, okay. It was in the holidays. This might seem a bit odd parenting, but I said, okay, go ahead. You know, you live on Cocoa Pops. And I bought these 2 enormous boxes of Cocoa Pops. And after about 3 days, he felt so ill, never looked at another Cocoa Pop or other cereal again in his life. You know, I don't know if that helps.
That's great.
Lead by example. You know, if they had, one of our other kids actually had a number of health problems and problem with the thyroid, and actually we said go gluten-free keto and do that, and she corrected an autoimmune thyroid in about 6 weeks and normally would have been put on medication. So sometimes something comes up like their skin or their weight or something that you know is kind of linked to the nutrition, and you can just maybe gently support them to try it for a few weeks. And sometimes they, you know, she's stuck to it since because her health's so important to her. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. It does help just to hear your story. Cereal is one of the battlegrounds, frankly, where I drew the line. You know, my problem was I came into low carb. My children were in their young teens and tweens. So like I used to buy cereal when they were younger, and then I quit buying it.
Yes.
And so that has been like a what? And
you can't, once you know the information as a parent, you can't buy that stuff. Like I've got grandchildren now, I don't buy them sweets. And part of me thinks, oh, you know, that's kind of weird because I loved it if my grandparents bought me sweets. But I buy them toys and we do stuff together. And once you know it, you can't. I mean, maybe I'm sure you've had that conversation with them that from everything you know, to you doesn't feel like a loving act anymore to buy them cereal.
Right. Yeah. My defense now with my 14-year-old is like, it's my New Year's resolution. I can't buy any of that stuff anymore. Yeah. And she was like, she has no comeback to that. She's just like, oh.
Outwitted by mama. That's good.
Yeah. But
I mean, you know, the other thing to explain to them, as I was saying before, is that it actually affects the brain development. You know, when you look at the scans of people who eat a very high carb, sugary diet, you know, there are differences in the motivation, nucleus accumbens, as Dr. Nick was mentioning. It kind of downgrades the frontal lobe ability. With it makes impulsivity slightly more of a problem. Nobody wants anything messing with their brain, do they? So, you know, that's another good argument as well to use with them. It's not just the sort of physical side. The brain is physical, isn't it? But it's more than that. It's kind of altering your brain chemistry over time.
If I might ask one more question.
Sure, go ahead.
My husband and I do eat very low carb, keto, a little bit higher fat, very low carb, but I do buy things like sourdough bread for the kids, or like you were mentioning about your one son, they may have rice while we have cauliflower on the side. But I have wondered, am I doing my kids a disservice by including higher fat in their meals when they are still eating carbohydrate?
That can be.
Should I modulate how much fat I put in the meals for them if they're continuing to eat carbohydrate or some processed, grains?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to take that, Jimmy, because it's slightly more.
Yeah. So when you don't want to eat high fat, high carb. That's probably metabolically the worst combination. I know we have 2 dietitians up here on stage. I definitely want Shanna and Temple to chime in on this. Feel free to unmic yourself when I'm done talking here, either one of you guys. Yeah, when you combine fats with the carbohydrates, that's a metabolic disaster to pack on pounds really fast. If you're gonna eat high carb, eat low fat. If you're gonna eat low fat, eat higher carb. You don't want to mix those two. Shanna, is that what you do with your clients?
For the most part, and I do remind them that from what I've seen, natural fats versus processed seed oils, those seem to be different. And usually in nature, it's hard to find a high carb, high fat together. So if you're excluding the processed foods, then it's a lot easier. But Jennifer, I feel your pain. My kids are 17, 15, and 12. So it's hard to get them all on board. I don't promote it as high fat, but just more of the natural food and trying to get away from the processed foods. But that's what I focus on in my practice. So I focus mostly on just trying to avoid processed carbohydrates as much as possible and fried foods. And usually that makes it a lot easier.
That's a good rule of thumb. And real quick, Temple?
Yeah, I second what you said, Jimmy, and you, Shayna. I think that sweet fat combination is really dangerous. I think it can help breed some of that addiction. I just second what you said, Jimmy. I agree.
Well, Shanna, thank you for being here. Shanna Husson, you guys, is a registered dietitian, and you know a lot about this subject because you're helping your clients all the time with it. You do believe in a ketogenic diet, and so what's your question or thoughts?
Thank you, Dr. Unwin, for being here. I'm always looking for more professionals to follow and get resources from, but Dietary Guidelines 2020 were just released not too long ago, and I don't point that out too much with the clients that I work with because I really just try to get them to eat real food. I think the Dietary Guidelines promoted 13% of added sugar down to 10% added sugar, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. And again, with working with clients, I try not to focus too much on added sugars versus natural sugars, but do you think that that's important to try to convey when working with clients? And just wanted to get your overall thoughts on the guidelines because I was disappointed with that there wasn't more focus put on sugar in general. I'm not sure exactly where you practice, but I'm not sure what your knowledge base is with the Dietary Guidelines, but just wanted to get your thoughts on those.
Thank you, Shanna. She's in the UK.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because in terms of the sources of actual glucose in the diet, so there's added sugar, as you say, there's kind of naturally occurring sugars, and then there's the sugars that all the pasta and the bread and everything kind of break down to. So added sugars, like Ada was saying, those are the kind of low-hanging fruit, if you like, and people can recognize that and cut those. It's the total amount of glucose, isn't it, that's the problem, and bread and the pasta is just as much of a problem in terms of sugar addiction, food addiction, as that added sugar. So maybe we just have to kind of look at that overall amount that people are consuming and educate them about that. I don't know if that answers your question really, but because I tend to work with mostly people who really need to cut all or most of it out because they've either got diabetes pretty bad or, they're actual food or sugar addicts. We're more or less educating them about all those three different sources of sugar: added, natural, and foods that break down into sugar. And then how can they reduce all of those things down?
I think the added sugar thing, Jen, is a big ruse. And Shanna, I know you and I talked recently on my podcast. When you say added sugar, it's like, okay, so the natural sugars aren't harmful. The foods that turn to sugar in the body aren't harmful. I think we're just slow riding our way down to low carb. They just don't want to jump there yet.
And that makes me really happy to hear that because that's what I do with my clients is I look at the total carbohydrates more than the actual types of carbohydrates and then getting them into the whole food realm and then guiding them towards natural fats and natural proteins. I just think we completely missed the mark on the U.S. guidelines, and it just makes it even more confusing. Like, even I look at food labels, I think they've just gotten more confusing over the years. I think we've done a complete disservice with missing the mark on those.
It's in big food's interest that people don't understand the difference between added sugar and real sugar and all of that. The confusion works on their side, doesn't it? So,
yes.
The more we can all do to educate people, I think that, that's the better, really.
Shanna, thank you.
And you're welcome. Just one last thought.
Yes.
It's so tough. Like, even when I say to my kids, if they wanted to have processed bread or pasta, I'm like, well, that basically breaks down like a sugar in your body. And they just look at me like I'm an alien. So it's a long way to go. Even the dietitians' kids are confused. So
yes.
We'll keep working at it.
I remember one time the famous diabetes low-carb doctor, Dr. Richard Bernstein, he went on some diabetes education show, Jen, and he had a dietitian on. With all due respect to the two on the stage, they get it. This one did not. This one thought, oh, well, it doesn't raise your blood sugar. It's not going to turn to sugar. So Dr. Bernstein brought a piece of bread on the stage. He stuck it at the roof of his mouth, held it there, and then did a little test to see if there was was the presence of sugar, and the test was like black, which was like really high presence of sugar, to make the point that even if it doesn't taste sweet on the tongue, it's still going to have that glycemic impact in your blood.
A proportion of the patients that we try and help really have a problem with bread, giving up bread and pasta, and the more savory foods can be really hard for people as well.
Yes. Next up is a new keto dieter. She's been on this for a little over a week. What's up, Malika?
I'm a type 2 diabetic. When I started keto, I weighed myself yesterday morning, and I took my blood sugar yesterday morning, and they were both high. I took my blood sugar this morning. I did not take insulin last night, so I'm an insulin dependent diabetic normally, and it was all the way down to 90 when insulin was the only thing I did not take, because I followed a ketogenic plan, it was shocking to see the number when I didn't take insulin. You said something about SGLT inhibitors. Like, what type of medications are those? I need to monitor, because for me, I tried the whole transition thing last week, because that's what I heard from someone else. Don't go straight to keto, reduce your carbs like next week, and then go full keto the week after. That doesn't work for me, because I'm leaving those things in my system. I think that's the key reason why I had problems last week with the reduction thing doesn't work. I'm either all in or I'm all out.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult for you from a sugar food addiction point of view. For some of us, it's easier to go cold turkey, because then we're not trying to moderate. It's just clear, isn't it? It's black or white. Like, it's out of the house, we're not having it. But as you say, Malika, you need to be careful because you're on insulin, maybe some other medications. Now, I'm not a medical doctor, so you probably need to consult someone who knows more about your case and knows more about the medications. The ones I was mentioning, which maybe you're not on, SGLT inhibitors. That's all I know. I know to warn people. So you'd have to check out whether those are the sort of form of drug, the class of drug
hey
that
guys,
you're on.
you know I'm all about healthy nutrition, and I have a brand new product I want to tell you about called Athletic Greens. This is not just a multivitamin. It has 75 essential elements that you want to have in your diet, from probiotics to greens to digestive enzymes to prebiotics. There's so many things that they pack into the Athletic Greens. The main reason why I love them is it puts it all in one place. Like, literally, you'd have to a la carte buy all of these different supplements, and they do it all in one package. So if you go to athleticgreens.com/Jimmy, and you can get a special discount if you go there, and the discount is you get a free 1-year supply of their vitamin D, as well as some of their travel packs. Go check it out, you guys. athleticgreens.com/
Well, and Malika, I would highly recommend you hire somebody like the next person up, Temple, because that's what she does. Like, she helps people just like you all the time. Could be helpful as you're brand new to this to kind of figure out how do you titrate it down? Do you go to cold turkey? I'm just like you, Malika. Give me the cold turkey, because I gotta be the shock factor. I went from 1,600 grams of carbs to 20 when I started my journey. I don't recommend that. In hindsight, I don't recommend that. But that's what I did.
We've definitely had people in the practice I work with David coming, getting off insulin. That is definitely possible. It's just that yourself, you're going to need to titrate that down as well at the same time. Because obviously, if you're not having the sugar, you don't need as much insulin. But I can't guide you on that because I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a head doctor.
Got it. I'm contacting my doctor today anyway, just to get advice from her. But when you said that term, it just sparked me to say, "Oh, what is she referring to?"
Yes.
So ask her if any of your medications are SGLT inhibitors.
Oh, yep, I already wrote that down. I just, I'm talking to her today because of the
good.
Thank you, Malika.
It's just a big change for just one day, so maybe I need other changes that I need to take into account.
I'm just so hopeful for you and wishing you best wishes in the next few weeks' journey.
Well, and Malika, things can change really fast. I remember my co-author on Keto Clarity, Dr. Eric Westman, he told me that one of his patients he put on a ketogenic diet was on 200 units of insulin, and within one day was on 0 insulin units. So it can happen very fast. I'm glad you're going to see your doctor. Definitely work with them and work with someone who can help you tweak your diet to make this work for you. We're all rooting for you, Malika. Thank you for coming up on stage. Temple is a registered dietitian. She knows a thing or two about ketogenic diets. What you got, Temple?
Thanks for having me up. I just had a question. I deal with a lot of sugar addiction in my clients, so I coach women on keto. It's very similar to situations to Malik, and I was just wondering if you had any good resources that you recommend. If it's needed, I'll refer out. Anything like books or even programs or worksheets that you recommend for clients that have a full-on sugar addiction that could be good guides or resources, or even for practitioners like myself, good starting points, like a book or something to just get more informed.
It's brilliant that you've asked that. Yes, I can point you to quite a few people, Americans as well, who are really doing great stuff in this field. So my book's out this week. It's called Fork in the Road, and it's on Amazon. So if you just look at Jen Unwin Fork in the Road, it's a nice, friendly kind of starter place for people. There are extra resources and things they can look up in the back. Just getting going in the States by a wonderful group. If you look on the website, sugarxglobal.com, Dave Wolf, Anna Fruling, and a few other people who are experts in this field, and they're setting that up as a kind of community for people. There's going to be groups and support. Dave Wolf as well, if you look up Trigger Free Nutrition, either the website or he hangs around on Twitter, he is on Clubhouse sometimes. He runs a free group on a Thursday that people can just zoom in. He puts the link up on a really good Facebook page, which is run by Bitten Johnson and people who support her. That Facebook page is called Sugar Bomb in Your Brain. If you just look up on Facebook, Sugar Bomb in Your Brain, there's loads of resources on there. Dave puts up his Zoom link for his free Thursday meeting.
Yes.
I'm here on a Wednesday night. I've got a Clubhouse called Fork in the Road. We're on 6 p.m. UK time on a Wednesday night, and quite a few of those people that I've just been mentioning, those experts, hop into the group as well. So if people want ongoing support, which I think is a big part of it actually, you know, having the knowledge is one thing, getting off sugar the first time is one thing, but if you've got a proper addiction problem, it's like anything else, smoking or alcohol, you're probably going to wobble. That's usually how we learn long term to stay in recovery.
Yes.
Is by falling off a few times. That support is really important.
So I have a few resources to add to that. Thank you, Dr. Unwin. So Ann-Louise Gittleman has written books about sugar for years, and I've interviewed her several times on the Live and La Vida Low Carb show. Great books. I love how she talks about all the names for sugar, because guys, whether you like it or not, they're not going to always tell you sugar. They're going to have a OSE kind of word on the end of it. I'm sure you teach that all the time, Temple, to your clients and trying to get them to say, okay, ribose, that's just another form of sugar. You just got to avoid that. And even like evaporated cane juice. Yeah, another form of sugar. So you have to kind of do that education. Ann-Louise Gittleman. There was a film that came out, so people that are into learning by movies, that came out of Australia right about 4 or 5 years ago, called That Sugar Film. Incredible on this topic here, helping them overcome sugar addiction. And then for the more nerdy people, Temple, in your clientele, maybe send them to the Robert Lustig viral video that he did, Sugar, the Bitter Truth. It's 90 minutes, like explaining all the ins and outs of the biochemistry about why we crave sugar and why we have what we're talking about here today, this addiction to crappy carbage. So I hope those resources help you.
Awesome. Thank you both. I'm excited. I just wrote everything you guys said down, so I appreciate you both.
And reach out if I talk too fast.
No, you're good. I got it. Thank you.
Yes. And of course, for all of you listening, if you came in late and you're like, wow, this is a fascinating conversation, I wish I could have heard the beginning. Guess what? You can. It'll be up on YouTube. Last question today comes from Zammy. What you got for us?
Hi, Jimmy.
Hi.
UK. I'm first one, so I'm a big fan of yours. I follow your podcast.
Thank you.
Low Carb. And Jen Eisenhart, Fat Fiction is a fantastic film. I've got my other friends who didn't believe about keto and low carb, and they're actually now following a keto lifestyle because of watching the film and realizing about the myths of cholesterol and everything. So it's amazing to have Jen on here as well. And I'm part of the Fork in the Road group that Jen hosts. So I've only kind of reached out to her last week, and she's very supportive and got me in. But my interesting thing is about, because I'm purely a carb addict, but it's taken me 4 years doing low carb to actually admit it to myself. But I think what I wanted to ask to Jen is about cheese as a trigger. I didn't even consider that, but now reading your book and everything, I kind of looked back and what it is for me, it's not strong cheeses, but mild cheeses like cheddar and mozzarella. Something about those mild cheeses that gets you to overeat. That's with having high carb foods. But now that I've cut out all the sugars and the carbs, I don't have that at the moment. Do you think cheese is still a very much trigger I need to look at? And so I'm being more mindful about it? Is it something that needs to be cut out completely, or do you think I could actually be mindful about it and it could be moderated?
Thank you, Zammy.
What a great question. Now, dairy cheese can be problematic, as I say, for some people because they struggle to moderate it. Some dairy, obviously, like milk and cream, is that rare fat carb combo, isn't it? I know there's not a lot of carb in it, but there is some. And for those of us that have got the really sensitive carb addict brain, the little bit of carb, same with nuts. So the carb fat combo in nuts, that, like, say for me, cashews have got enough carbs in them. I can't moderate cashews at all, so I tend to avoid nuts. The other thing with cheese is proteins in cheese can convert into casomorphines, which can be another sort of psychoactive factor of them, and people don't often realise that about cheese. And I think it's just so individual. You said 4 years, Sammy. Well, yeah, I was the same. I was doing low carb for 4 years before I started thinking, hang on a minute. And I'm a psychologist, for heaven's sakes. It took me a while to cotton on as well. It's so individual with the cheese. I mean, I used to be okay with it, and then I found it getting more and more problematic. So I thought, I'm just going to cut it out. But we all have to be careful not to cut out too much stuff and only do it carefully in consideration of your overall nutrition. So I think if you're able to have a little bit and enjoy that, and it doesn't set off other cravings, then go for it. If I have dairy, I'm just generally a lot hungrier and a lot more thinking about food and cravings. So that was the problem for me. But it is a very individual thing, and you have to just try a little dairy free and see how you feel.
And people forget that lactose is another form of sugar, so you might have a reaction to that as well.
Yeah, exactly. So milk, I mean, a lot of low carbers cut out milk anyway, don't
right.
They tend to replace it with cream.
We do the heavy cream, and you in the UK, you get this thing called, guys, in America, you've never heard of double cream before? Oh my God. Oh my God.
It's amazing.
It's so good. Yeah, David has a lot of double cream in his coffee. He still does that, and this kind of at least half the sugar that there would have been in the milk, but there is still that little bit. And I think it's also got that lovely kind of mouthfeel.
Yes.
We associate with dessert, and
it's like a pudding.
It's like a pudding, so it depends in a way how far gone you are.
Yes.
You can still have that stuff or not, and then you just have to be honest with yourself. I let myself have a little bit of dairy a few weeks ago, and then struggle with that again. I'm still learning myself.
Well, you test along the way, because over time you may develop a tolerance for it where you can have it, and then if you find that you don't, your blood sugar goes wonky, you don't feel well, you cut it out again. That's the beauty of this. It's an ever-evolving process.
Yeah, it's a lifelong, definitely. Once you're going to be working this stuff out forever. That's what I think now. There isn't a sort of la land you get to where it's all easy peasy and it's never difficult again. I think you always have to be aware of your own triggers and don't get lulled into, well, I'm fine now, I can cope with a bit of cake now. If you've got a definite problem with food and sugar addiction, that's never going to go well. People after 20 years of alcohol abstinence can fall really hard. It's the same sort of model.
Yes. Well, Zammy, thank you for that question. We're all out of time. You were very generous with your time today. Guys, again, Dr. Jen Unwin, go check her out. Fork in the Road is the name of the book. Available wherever books are sold. Generally, Amazon's a good place to get it. And then forkintheroad.co.uk is the website. Wonderful to have you here today. Thanks for gracing us with your presence here.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it, Jimmy. We'll do it again sometime.
Get inspiration from the Living La Vida Low Carb Show. Hey, the livinglowcarbshow.com.